Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Got Mental Health Podcast. I am your co-host, Rachel Cove. I am a multi-passionate entrepreneur, author, artist, mother, and certified recovery coach.
I'm your co-host, Arthur Mogilevsky, entrepreneur, girl dad, animal activist, and owner of AM Healthcare, a premier substance abuse and mental health treatment program.
With the collective experience of 21 years working in the mental health field, we are excited to bring to you a safe and fun place to talk all things mental health.
We will be interviewing experts, thought leaders, entrepreneurs, and professionals in the entertainment industry to better educate, inform, and inspire our community to have positive mental wealth.
Welcome back to the Got Mental Health Podcast. I am your co-host, Rachel Cove, along with my other co-host, Arthur
Mogilevsky, Rachel.
No.
Let's get it right.
No. We are in the studio with Shelly Stevens. Shelly Stevens started her career in mental health 20 years ago as a drug counselor. In that time, she received a master's in clinical psychology and is now a licensed clinical counselor. Before that, she worked in the entertainment industry in various production jobs, eventually settling into her equity stage managing. Shelly has worked with clients struggling with addictions of all kinds. She has worked in detox, residential treatment, and intensive outpatient environments. Shelly has counseled people from many walks of life, and she has determined that brokenheartedness is the common factor that haunts them. She endeavors to bring people into attunement with their higher selves. Shelly considers people struggling to understand themselves to be the bravest among us. Juicy.
Right?
Oh, that ending was so juicy.
Yeah.
I want to dive into that.
Bravest among us.
So let's just go there, okay? Because when I read that, I was immediately wanting to just like delve into your mind about what that meant around like, what does it mean for you that broken-hearted people are like, why do you find people to be in the field that you work in addiction, right? You work with PTSD, complex PTSD, you work with people with borderline personality disorder, people that are diagnosed with bipolar 1, bipolar 2. You're dealing with people with sexual trauma. You're dealing with people who have all these quote unquote disorders, right? What do you think is the common theme or is at the core of all of these diagnoses?
It's a disrupted attachment from your primary caregiver from ages 0 to 7, 7 to 10, 10 on. It's that. We're not built for that. It's like that level of trauma is akin to combat, I think, to a young developing nervous system.
Can you go into that?
Well, not with any scientific, I can't speak to it
This
like...
is all an opinion-based podcast. So.
Yeah. So... when I was a drug counselor before trauma was on the scene, because now it's everywhere, thank goodness. No one was talking about ACE score. That was just getting developed, I think, in 91 or something like that, whatever. But I used to say it's like throwing a bowling ball into a sapling. So a developing tree, and you throw a bowling ball in that. And I was talking about family of origin shit. I was talking about what goes on. And not knowing what I was talking about. And then we grow deformed around it. I used to say perverted, corroded. I used to use those terms because we're not growing correctly. And then we interface with the adult world unskilled. We have these fractured attachments. We can't connect to people, so, or we connect too much. It's too much, too soon, too little, too late. And it fucks us up, man.
So, the question comes to, is there a solution to this, or is it?
Everyone needs to learn how to parent.
Okay, so here's the theory here's what I always tell a client that calls me. No parent is given a handbook in the hospital on how to raise a child, right? That's like one of my first opening statements when a kid or when a client starts talking to me about where they're at and what they're looking for, right? And so the idea that we need to have better parenting systems, right? If you lived in a utopic world of Shelly, how would you design the perfect system for a parent to educate themselves on being one, if there isn't one already?
I don't know. It's the thinking about this with you guys today. I was thinking about just my own lived experience in my matriarchal line. Ooh, hi.
There we go.
Is that better?
I need to hear that sexy voice.
What's happening?
Yes.
Anywho, and it's like a copy it's a bad copy of a copy. No parent has a kid and says, I just want to fuck this little human person up. No one does that.
I mean, some people do.
Some people do, but they're that. I think that's a really low percentage. I think most people bring children into the world thinking it's going to help something, and they're not going to do what their parents did to them, and they do it anyway. So to answer your question, I don't know. It's kind of a teardown. Everyone has to realize that there is an issue, and that the kids are getting misparented, and they're not. There's no starting with my generation. I remember my generation. I'm 60. Right out of high school, my friends were having kids and getting married. They were doing it. And I remember sitting at the table and they, do you want chicken fingers or chocolate milk? And right there I went, this is a problem. This is a problem because, and I know this is a dumb example, and I'm not a parent, by the way. So, but I thought we're giving them already too many choices. What are you doing? Just, give the kid their food and say, that's your food. Here's the boundaries. So again, I want to stay in my lane. It's above my pay grade, the parenting. I think all parents are amazing. I have mostly parents as clients.
I understand that you're not a parent, yet I do believe a lot of the work is becoming someone's own inner adult parent to those broken parts of who we are, right? So it's to speak to the fractured attachment that you brought up. What is fractured attachment? How do you define fractured attachment? Because I thought that was so beautifully said.
Well, it's the thing where I don't know if you've seen that. Gosh, I'm going to mislabel this, but it's a spooky person experiment where there's a little kid in a high chair. It's a baby in arms, and it's he can sit up. So I don't know how old he is, like 6, 7 months. And the mom's looking at the baby's face, and the baby's engaged and bonded and smiles and the thing, and then the mama turns away. And the baby just right away goes, hey, huh? What? And does things to try to get the mom, makes utterances, tries to be cute, exclaims. So there is a securely attached kid in an experiment where the mom just turns away like this, okay? And then the baby goes into that kind of distress. So what is fractured attachment? It's that, but there's no experiment. It's like your mother's dysregulated. She has postpartum. It's like, or the dad's not around, or it's a fucking ACE score. It's like were you in an environment where there was domestic violence? Did someone, were you predated upon sexually? I mean, that's what, and it's not just fractured, it's splintered. This borderline.
I feel like what you're saying is that you have it's like a spectrum, right? You have the extremes of, DV or sexual misconduct or neglect or lack of a parent. And then you have the minor situation where the mom just looks away for the moment and doesn't give the kid the attention. You don't even think that that's a traumatic experience potentially, but that creates some kind of dysregulation within the kid.
It did, but then the rub is there's a thing called good enough parenting. I think it's at Bowlby. It's good enough parenting. It's my favorite thing to bring up to parents because then what happens? The mom turns back, engages with the baby, and it's a corrective experience. And the baby says, here's where I live. Here's my safety. This person has me. We're not supposed, you look at animals getting born in the wild, they're steaming, and they're going for the boob. They're going for milk right away. They know what to do. We don't do that. We need holding and help and safety. For how long? How long do you think you could survive in the wild? How old, rather? Like 7, 8? Like when? I don't know. That's what I'm talking about. It's like that level of neglect on someone who is just absolutely developing.
Yeah, if you think about it, the animals in the wild, they don't have life distractions in a sense. They just have wild distractions. So whatever their environment, they have their own environments, obviously, but they don't have a job. There's no cell phones. They don't have the bills to pay. They just have to worry about eating and not being eaten, right? And so I'm not saying that is not a lot to think about, because it is, right? But ultimately, your focus is survival of your plane, right? And making sure that your kids grow up. So I think that natural instinct, whereas here, the natural instinct is to provide care for the child, right? But then you get that distraction of, my cell phone's ringing, or the nanny can't come today, or I gotta pay the bill, or whatever it is. My husband decided or wife is cheating on me, and I have to deal with that, right? It's like necessarily have animals that get jealous of other animals and for cheating purposes or having to pay for bills. So I don't know if that's a good comparison enough, but I mean, I think that it's much different distractions in a sense.
The other thing is that the animals in the wild are prepared for the thing. So they get chased by a lion. The lion does not catch them. It might like claw their flank, whatever, but they're out. They're good.
Right.
And then they buck and they snort and they spit and they do all this shit to get the cortisol off of them and they carry on.
Right.
They're good. They graze. They drink water. They're cool. They're unfazed. We go through fucking the shit I'm describing, which is horrific.
Right.
And we don't buck and spit. We don't do any of it. We absorb it into our soft tissues, and it twists our schema, it twists our psyche, and we go forward in that. That's why I love working with addicts, because at least we're honest. Addicts hurt out loud.
It's interesting because I think for the typical human, they wouldn't think addicts are honest.
Mm-hmm.
They would think most addicts are very dishonest.
I know.
So what do you mean by that?
It's a thing I'm working with lately. I change stuff up in my own imagination because I'm a client too, man. So I think that I think we're honest. I think we hurt and bleed out loud. I think we're messy addicts, active addicts. I don't know. There's something very honest about it. It's like I'm falling apart. We're the identified patient in the family. Meanwhile, the family, which is often quite sick, but we're easy because we're fucking, we have the consequences of an active addiction.
I love that you said that. And it reminds me of something you said to me a long time ago, and maybe you can say perfectly what it was, but it was something along the lines of our society has acceptable addictions and unacceptable addictions, right? So like acceptable addictions would be like what? Like workaholism.
Yeah. Working out. Keeping fit, all that stuff. I see someone come in when they're quite fit. That's a problem. It's like, you just see, except I don't remember saying that, but yeah, that makes sense.
Well, it speaks to what you're saying though, because I often use very similar language when I'm running groups with people. I say, listen, when your addiction is substances, the consequences are very obvious and they hit you in the face very quickly. Physically, you will have negative consequences with your health. Emotionally, you're going to disrupt your relationships. You're going to disconnect. You're going to lie. The consequences are much more obvious, right? So it's much easier for you to actually get help when the consequences are that quick and obvious. And I always tell people in addiction, like you have the power in your family to wake your family up, right? Like you have the power to change something. Whereas, if you're a workaholic, right? If you're a perfectionist, you don't necessarily have the worst consequences in the world to be able to go get yourself help, right? Because you might have all the money in the bank, right? Do you get what I'm saying?
I do know what you're saying. And then I cut to the dad that I have that's got some money and means and has protected his family. And he's been behind a newspaper, I mean, metaphorically, but behind a newspaper the entire childhood of his kids because he's been earning the money. I mean, there's something that gets really lost in that for these guys. Anyway, so that's in there.
Well, I think it's because, especially for the baby boomer generation, because I analyze this all the time, the baby boomer generation, to be a quote unquote good dad was, I'm going to provide for my family. And that meant I'm a good dad. Everything was very black and white, very rigid, right? So now we're the products, right, of this generation of very little attunement and connection. So let's speak to that, right? What happens to a person's psyche? And we don't have to go into the science of it, but what happens to someone's psyche, to a child, when there's very little attunement and connection that's provided for them?
I used to say, we start baking biscuits. So that's where, like up here, like the Lucy thing where, remember the conveyor belt where she's trying to stick the candies in her mouth? I feel like too much too soon. So so we start making stuff up in our own mind. So that's where anxiety comes from. It's unmet needs. It's gaslighting. It's not understanding your environment. It's not understanding who you are there, where you are in space. It completely disconnects you from your birthright. Your birthright is that you come through you have your drop of gold, your soul state. And then hopefully you're just not handled recklessly so you can go and carry on and be, give back. So I think it robs us of our ability to understand what safety is at the end of the day.
Yeah, you mentioned is it a book, Being a Good Enough Parent, or
That
what
was
is?
the term that I think it was Bowlby said about parenting, and it was from the 40s or 50s or something. The good enough parent.
What does that? What does that mean?
Just that that you set proper boundaries for your kids. Here no further. You're the parent, and that if you're a human being in front of your children, but if something goes far afield and you're funny in front of them, or they're frightened or feel strange in your presence, you have a corrective experience. You get down on their level, say, "Hey, man, I'm having a bad day." I mean, I'm sure Rachel can speak to this much better. So that's being a good enough parent, because we're not perfect, but we're good enough. And you give them back to your earlier question, like, how do we do it? It's like, what do kids need? Again, they need boundaries. They need hard boundaries, not pick the things. It's like, this is what you're eating. Parents that are solid. Like, how do you raise good kids? You make sure that the people having the children want them.
Yeah, well, that's an interesting point, but it can go in a lot of different directions.
Of course, this is broadly speaking 1,000 times.
Yeah. I mean, I agree with you in a sense of, I think it's a dance, to be honest with you, where it's not just always setting boundaries, it's also giving freedoms, because we live in a day and age right now where, like, I grew up where it was very strict. It's black and white. There's no, and then so I had to find my creative color to be able to express myself. Whereas now I feel like parents are being more honest with their kids. I mean, I don't want to speak generally, but like for me, like, I agree with you. I'm not going to hide from my child. I'm going to be expressive and show who I am, so that my daughter can feel that from me, and she understands where I'm at that moment. But at the same time, I want them to have the ability to explore beyond just what walls I can build for them, right? So it's tottering back and forth. I don't think it's one or the other in a sense, right?
Well, I think there's boundaries within the freedom, though. Like, there's freedom to go pursue what you want, and here are the boundaries around that. Like, I'm going to give you a car, and you have the right to drive the car where you want to drive to, but you need to buckle your seatbelt. And when there's a red light, you need to stop at the red light. I think, like, we've gone so, like, yeah, go ahead.
Agreed. No, but I'm thinking I think what came up for me is that I think that we treat kids like little adults lately, and in the last few years, 15 or so, and they're just absolutely not little adults.
What do you mean by treating them like little adults?
It's the shit
What's some examples?
It's the stuff that they're exposed to. They should. I mean, just even at the grocery aisle on the magazines. I mean, again, I don't think anyone. I think we're oddly prudish and over-sexualized. It's a trippy culture we live in. We're messing with them, with their heads, and the screens and all the. So I think that in an effort, my generation, an effort to get away from really wanting parents. That we were all latchkey kids. Everyone's working like dogs. Women can have it all. Women don't have to stay home anymore and raise babies.
Yeah.
Men just do what men are doing, which we just resource our men to death. Everyone's exhausted. TV fucking dinners. Convenience. All that happened. And it was all divesting everyone from the family unit. And it started in with me as a parent in my generation, I think.
I mean, knowing that none of this is going to go away. Okay, the exposure to everything and treating kids more like adults, and them being smart. Like, I'm having conversations with my daughter who's 6 years old, who I sometimes confuse her for a 20-year-old, right? And just the amount of information she knows. And that's nobody's fault. That's the exposure of the world. That it is what it is. I think that the key in these moments is having a conversation and just having an open and honest conversation with your kid, and just guiding them through, with respect. I think, for me as a kid growing up, I could just speak about myself, I was shielded in a lot of ways where my parents didn't want me knowing any of these things. That didn't help either, because as an explorative human being at that age, I wanted to know. I wanted to know what it is. And so me not having a conversation about sex and nobody talking to me about it, I'm not going to be like, oh, then it doesn't exist. I'm going to be like, no, I'm going to go figure it out on my own. And then it might not be the right answer. So I don't think shielding children either is a solution, because if a kid wants something, they're going to find a way to get it, right? I think it's a balance of, okay, here's the exposure. Now let's just sit down and have an honest conversation. I'll talk to you about my experience with this particular thing. I want to hear what your thoughts are on it, and let's see if we can guide it together.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Just the problem is that a lot of parents don't have time or the willingness or the want to do that. And I think that's so important. I think that there's a lot of value in that, in a sense.
I don't think it's that people don't have time. I think they're not conscious to create the time.
Sure.
It takes seconds to get on eye level with a kid. It takes minutes to own a behavior. It takes...
When you have a kid, you sacrifice your life, full stop.
Yeah.
That's why I didn't become a parent, because I was too busy doing my own thing and parenting myself. So it's like, I knew that. That's how I looked at it. It's like, am I willing to really sacrifice myself to the degree that's going to take to raise a good human? You know, and you're right. I don't think people know how that doesn't take much.
I mean, I do, like, to what you said, like, we know this isn't going away. I also think we're in a really beautiful time around knowledge. We now know everything that neuroscience says about trauma. We now have all the books written about attachment, right? We have Peter Levine out there who has showed us like what happens. You know, we have The Body Keeps the Score, the book around that, right? So there are so many solutions, right? I do think that parents are now being given so many things to read. There's so many more resources now that our parents didn't have, right? Be a good kid, go out there and make good choices, right? But now I think we can explain the consequences of choices, right? We can start teaching our kids like, hey, you're going to be an adult. This is what a choice is, right? This is what a consequence is. This is what a feeling is, right? So, you know, I was just thinking about earlier when you said fractured attachment, right? You know, we have attachment, we have anxious attachment, avoidant attachment, disorganized attachment, secure attachment. And I think the goal is always, how do I raise a secure child, right? So let's talk about that. Right? You're like shaking your head, but it is possible.
I think so.
Even in any situation, I think it's possible to raise a secure child. How do you think it's possible to raise a secure child?
Well, here's the good news. It's like, even with a high ACE score of 4 or over out of 10 questions, and with, you know, you're just in a hellscape. If you're in a school system and you have one adult that sees you, you may have a bit of a shot. So that's how extraordinary the human psyche is in the central nervous system to kind of align with the truth. And the truth is, we're not pieces of garbage. We actually are worth it, and all that. So someone gives us that attention. So that's the good news. How to do it, I don't know. It really starts with the parents. And as you're talking, I started thinking about all the clients I've had, men mainly, that were Ritalin kids. You know, back when I was a kid, I don't know, man. What was it? Nothing was named. People were just behaving in the way they were behaving. No one was medicated, except the parents.
What do you think of this? Is a controversial subject, and I'm okay to have opinions around it. Mm-hmm. What do you think about ADHD and its diagnosis? Do you think it really exists?
I think that everything lives under the umbrella of trauma. Everything, every single solitary thing.
I
think the DSM is made for the insurance companies to make money, and it's really unfortunate, because we are not a bento box, we are not a constellation, we are a cause and effect, and it's staggeringly frustrating for me. So ADHD. So you know, on paper, I probably have every acronym there is in that book. So ADHD, yes, you know, your brain's crack-a-lackin'. I don't know, man. You bathe a fucking developing brain in battery acid, it's gonna get porous. It's gonna lose some stuff. And then you go to school, and then you have to do the workarounds because you've got this thing going on because your brain is so busy and it just hasn't had time to upwire it because you're just trying to fucking survive, yeah? Every day, or ward off the bad shit that's happening to you every fucking day. So you don't upwire correctly. That's what it is. Major depressive disorder, OCD. They're just these gross expressions of this just how perverted our delicate systems.
I have a conspiracy theory.
You?
I love those.
Yes, you do.
Those
You
are
and I
my
can talk
favorite.
about conspiracy
Yeah.
theories all day long.
Those are my favorite.
How much of and speaking to the insurance, and you and I are on the same page. I mean, obviously about insurance and how annoying that shit is, but how much do you think that diagnoses exist for the benefit of big pharma and medicating people rather than, like, as humans, we need to define things because we're pretty simple. So we need to know, like, this is red, that's green, yellow. This is what you do for these colors. You have ADHD. This is the protocol for you. You have this is the protocol for you, right? But humans don't, we keep getting this analogy that we're computers. But there's so many outliers that go unnoticed, that go unseen, that one little moment where mommy left you to go, buy the groceries, and that's it. You've detached from her. Nobody fucking knows that moment, and you don't even know that moment. But, like, it's there.
Yeah.
Right? Okay, so now I'm going to throw in ADHD for you. Okay, let's put some medications in there. It's like, are we just working up an uphill battle that just keeps getting steeper and steeper?
Yes,
I mean,
absolutely. Oh, yeah. No, it's horrible.
Like, awareness is there, but is it really awareness, or is it just shit that we define so that, like, again, trauma, baseline, I agree. That's it's the hot topic right now. What's to say that in 10, 15 years, they don't say it's, gabba gabba goo. And all of a sudden that's the new treatment form. And that's really, it's like, so how do we really know, right? You have all these books, but.
I think by cause and effect. I think as if you do this, how do you feel after? Like, we now know, like, stress, my favorite definition of trauma is overwhelming stress on the body. That's what's going on. It's very stressful to disconnect from mommy or daddy. I need you to survive. I feel disconnected from you. Now what? And I think the solution is parents need to be more curious of the impact that their behaviors have on their kid, whether they think it has an impact or not. It's be curious. Hey, when mommy left to the grocery store, how did that feel?
Yeah.
And then don't tell them that their feeling is wrong or you're being dramatic. Don't gaslight them. Well, that's not what mommy did, and I'm going to the grocery store to buy you orange juice because you need orange juice.
But now we're careening into this other space of safe spaces, and everyone's a winner, and let's all have let's
participation
really,
trophies.
hang out in our feelings and like 15 things.
But it's going the opposite direction now too, because there are rooms of people that say, listen, if you are emotionally inept and incapable of laughing at yourself, get the fuck out of this room.
Thank you. That's how it should be.
I was in a room like that. It was in a comedy skit, whatever. And the guy's like, look, if you can't handle what I'm going to talk about, I suggest leaving now. And, like, everybody just started clapping and hoorahing, which is interesting because it's like everything else in life. You have the pendulum, right? It swings one way. If it gets too far, it's going to start swinging the other way. So, yes, we've gotten into that winner mentality. Everybody deserves a trophy. I think it's starting to move back a little bit where it's like, no, you didn't win. You didn't win.
You didn't earn the trophy.
You didn't earn the trophy. In some corners of the world, right? I don't think it's entirely back to that place, but I think people are just tired of that bullshit.
What do you have to contribute to the universe? What are you doing here? Are you going to contribute or are you going to consume? That's what I'm tired of. Consumers. Just consumers of people, consumers of, goods and services, just consumers. It's like, and like scorched earth. Personality, just scorched earth. We talk about this split or fractured attachment. It's like we can introject it where we feed on ourselves and we can very fucking all the things, that's where the major depressive disorder, all those things come in. We feed on ourselves. We're so sad. We can become obese or gamble or have too much sex, or all the things. But it's all like this, feeding on ourselves. And then there's people who, I don't think this is the term, but extroject. Anyway, they go outward. And those are those poor borderline personalities. Those are those, the DSM-5 used to call them characterological. I mean, that's awful. And those people I call them scorched earth, man, because they take hostages, they ruin lives, they lay waste, they gaslight, they're at the effect in the worst way possible. And they are ripples in a pond, and and they're the mother of the and then the thing. And so it's just this ripple effect, bad copy of a copy of a copy.
Yeah. But I loved what you said earlier. It's like, no one has a baby and looks at that, maybe 1%. And
A
those are the
tiny-
and those are the fucking
psychopaths.
psychopaths
The
that are
psychopaths.
1% that are looking at that baby like, I'm going to torture you. I'm
Opportunity.
going to like, that's not most parents.
No, I don't think so.
Thank God.
Thank God. So a lot of this is accidental. A lot of this is parents just not being aware, right? But if we look back, no one's holding their baby being like, when I raise you, I want you to be bipolar. I want you to have borderline personality disorder. And I also really want you to develop alcoholism. And I want you to be a self-harmer. That's what I want by the time you're 25.
So how many generations do you think it will take? Because here's the thing. We have that connection where it carried over, but we also have a bit more knowledge on mental health. And, we're a little bit biased because we work in this space. So we have that connection. But even having that information, you're still traumatizing your child. And I'm not saying you, just in general, we all are still in some capacity or another, whether we have a knowledge of it or not. And once it's already done, that's it. You can't take it back. So like now we're at a stage of our lives where at least we have the knowledge of trauma. We have the knowledge and understanding of what it is. How many more generations before we don't give it or pass it along?
I think it's impossible because yet again, if we look at trauma as overwhelming stress on the body, there's stress everywhere. Stimulus creates stress. Like we are stressed, right? I think the solution is to teach our children to properly know how to describe the feelings and sensations that are going on in their body and to teach them how to communicate it and to articulate it to people so that they don't have to hold that stress in their body. And then I think it's important for parents to know their job is to help regulate the child. The job is not to get your kid into college by the time, into Harvard, like when you're 7. Kids need your attunement and connection more than they need an iPhone.
Agreed. I think it'd take like 3 generations. Your daughter knowing what she's doing when she has kids is what it'll take.
And it might not even be, if she
And
has
her
kids,
mate.
her kids, yeah.
Or whoever, however it goes.
That's the thing, right? Because in order to have children, you need to have a mate, and you don't know where that mate's coming from or what their background is. So you have to symbiotically find somebody who's on the same page as you in an understanding of trauma, and then how to translate that and be there for your kid.
But even it doesn't even, because I think sometimes people think the word trauma is overused. It's just what do we want to create? Do we want to
Robots.
That's the 1%. That's the 1%.
AI. That's how you solve this motherfucker.
That's right. That's right. That's right. Make it just chip us.
Robot parents.
Yeah.
Well, I think on some level it has to do with intention, right? What is your intention in having a child? Do you want to create a child?
I can't even handle this. It's like it starts with, are you fit? Are
Physically
you
or mentally?
fit in all
Let's
the
define it.
ways? Physically, psychically, mentally, fucking soul. Are you fit? Are you fit in your body as a human person, as an adult, childbearing human person? Are you fit to make more?
So we should install scanners in bedrooms and toilet stalls.
What are you talking about? The hardware? I'm talking about, like how do you even define this? Like a roller across, she's fit,
Yeah.
she's good. By whose definition?
Let's put a credit card in everybody's pocket and it scans them before they're about to do anything.
What do you think a fit parent is?
It would be someone who and I've encountered these clients. There are people like this that were raised well. I have a colleague right now that was raised well. She's one of the new associates. She was raised well. We talked about it. It's like you come from good parenting. She goes, I do. And I can tell. You can tell.
How can you tell?
She's self-possessed. This girl's self-possessed. And the clients I've had, sometimes they come from good upbringings, but then other things happen that break their hearts, and then they become addicted. So
I think
you can tell.
You can tell, and I think a parent has to learn how to repair.
Mm-hmm.
We talk about the broken heart. A kid's going to have a million broken hearts. You are their first love as a parent. You are their first love, and you will be their first broken heart.
Mm.
Because when you tell them no, when you leave and you don't show up in the way they want you to.
Yeah.
Their heart is broken. They have huge emotions. And it's not our job as the parent to go in and try and manipulate those emotions. It's our job to honor them and to show them how to regulate their emotions by our ability to help regulate so that they have those skills as they develop and as they get older. But I think it has to do with our ability to repair and our ability to own our shit, that we have an impact on these people, right? Just like you have an impact on your clients, right? It's like we have impact. And how do we impact people with our choices and our behaviors, with our connection to our own emotions, right? And so like the ADHD thing, I hear Gabor Mate talk about this beautifully. So I'm not going to sound as good as Gabor Mate, but he talks about ADHD, right? I'm here. I'm present with you, right? Now all of a sudden you're scaring the shit out of me, right? You're speaking really loudly and my nervous system doesn't like it. So you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to check out. I'm going to dissociate. I'm going to leave for a second. I'm not really here, but my body's here, right? And he classifies that in some ways, like that's what kind of ADHD is like for a child. If it's too overwhelming in the moment, I'm going to check out.
It's fantastic.
And so he talks about these diagnoses, quote unquote, as survival mechanisms, right? And we talk about that. Do you think that addiction is in some way a survival mechanism, a way to cope?
It certainly starts out that way. Yeah, it starts out that way. Yeah. I remember when I drank my first bit of keg beer in a field. I think I was 15, and I drank, and my family was a house on fire, and I remember my shoulders falling in a way, and I remember thinking, this is an option. This is an option. I mean, it's really remarkable. So if you're raised in a real crazy spot, and there's an exit like that, it's
It's interesting because I understand where you're coming from.
I bet you do.
But the knowledge and understanding of what those substances do is there, and you're still choosing to do that. So is it a survival mechanism if you know that it can be destructive and harmful?
I think every survival mechanism has a secondary gain. I think every defense mechanism has a secondary gain. I think what I tell people is if perfectionism or workaholism or sex addiction or gambling addiction, like it serves a purpose. It gives you relief. It gives you a connection to something. It helps you leave the stress and the overwhelm. Okay, so what are the positive consequences of that? I'm feeling relief. I'm feeling less stressed. The negative consequences are what? I'm losing money in my bank account. I'm cheating on my husband or wife. I can't get hard unless I'm watching porn, right? I'm drinking myself to the point of passing out every night and I'm not available to my kids, right? Okay, so what's, is it working for you or not? And if it's not, that's when I think you have to seek help, seek therapy, seek a treatment center, right? But I'm just kind of, I think if we look at these diagnoses, it's like, that's it, you're done. You have borderline personality disorder. Nothing you can do about that. I think that's dangerous.
It's not accurate, and it's mean.
Why don't you think it's accurate?
I don't think it's accurate. I think they say you can't get cured from these personality things, access to, or whatever it is, where it's characterological things of this nature. I don't know about all that. I think that anyone who comes in, that's why I said that in that deal about I'm a fan of people who are trying to seek their understanding of themselves. It's a really big deal. So if you're in there somewhere and you know that you're crashing into walls, setting stuff on fire, not feeling good, making others feel like shit, if you come in seeking help, that's a big deal. That means something. I've worked with people that struggle with personality stuff, and it's they're some of the loneliest, emptiest people I know. And they know that something's off and funny. And they're so divorced from themselves that they can't identify it. It's excruciating. So, but again, so I think because can they change? If someone wants to change, they can change. That's the bottom line. Because you have the ego strength to go, I'm not showing up well. It's ego strength.
I mean, they're in the room with you, so that's already a start, right?
I think so. I think it's a big deal. Even if, my favorite client is a client that's there for their mom, or they're there for their family, or they're there because they don't want to be there.
Why?
because it's an opportunity, because somewhere buried in that they're not telling the whole truth, because they have been sick of using within that. They'll admit it to you.
They've recognized at least enough that they need to be there, but they're making the reason that they're there for someone
they're not
else
ready.
or something else.
They're not ready, and that's all right.
That's interesting, because that gives you the opportunity to dig.
And just do that motivational interviewing where you're just asking questions, and despite their best efforts, they're telling you the truth about themselves.
That was me in treatment. I was sent to treatment by my family who did an intervention on me, and I didn't want to be there for the first 2 weeks at all. I was the most difficult client. I would learn words. I would go to the dictionary, and I would learn words that I knew the counselor didn't know. And so the counselors would come up to me, and they would be like, you didn't clean your room. And I'd be like, oh, really? Well, you're actually prevaricating right now. And they'd be like, I'm not prevaricating right now. I'd be like, what's prevaricating mean? Right? And I would slam doors, and I would get the most, we had to write essays when we broke the rules, and I wrote the most essays. And I had one counselor come up to me, and I didn't want to be there. And I had one counselor come up to me, and he said, if you don't get sober, you're going to be a prostitute on Hollywood Boulevard. Mark my words.
Whoa.
Damn.
And
I was like,
whoa.
I'm like, who? I didn't know how to respond. I was shocked. But because of that, because of what he said, some part of my soul knew it.
Sure.
I was dying of alcoholism,
Awful.
But you wouldn't know because I was smiling all the time.
Understood.
Right? And
Outsides.
so I don't always think people have to be motivated. I think in the beginning, like, you don't always have to be motivated by your own life. You don't like your life. You don't like yourself.
What the fuck? It's like, and then the other thing too with clients is like get clean and sober. It's like Rick says, if you're here to get sober, you've missed a point. So it's like, so sobriety is just like such a small part of it. It's like you want to develop a life that you want to live for. It has to be drug and alcohol free because you don't do it well, or you do it too well, whatever the fuck. So grow up, figure that out. And then, but you want to build out a life that you want to live for. And no one has that coming into treatment. No one has that life yet. It's an abstraction. You're looking at others that have it. They say they have it. That's why modeling is kind of a big part of this gig, because you have to have at least a blush of something that somebody wants.
I'm just really taking that in for a second, because I mean, it's like it's so.
So that's a rough fucking thing to say to somebody. I am so careful with my fat mouth. I am careful. I have yet to borrow someone's future for them ever. So that's a trippy thing to say. It landed well on her though, because she's intelligent. And there's a lot going on here. But I mean, on a weaker person, that might not have landed well. I'm just saying.
Did that person know that you weren't a weaker person?
By then, maybe he made that determination.
Probably.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, I was 2 weeks in there. I mean, I don't think. I think now I probably would have gotten fired, right?
You wrote all those essays. So just like, fuck it. Let's just throw. I mean, I'm just going to say the worst thing ever to this chick and see. I mean, because you baby him, you bury him. So.
Yeah. I mean, I think for some people, it takes what it takes. I don't think he realized he saved my life.
Yeah, I mean, there's some beauty in direct honesty. I mean, I think it's the way that it's presented and to whom, of course, but I think sometimes it's, again, babying the client and just calling them out on their shit and just being like, yo, I mean, maybe not telling them they're gonna be a prostitute on Hollywood Boulevard, but like sometimes they need to hear some hard shit that's the reality that they're facing, and it's not just about let's have a conversation today about your childhood. It's like what you're doing can also you're going down a very dark path, or you're not already on it.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think some people really need to be told the absolute hardcore truth, and I think right now we're there with fentanyl that's in the streets, and I'm very brutally honest with clients. I don't tell them you're going to become a prostitute on Hollywood Boulevard, but I look at them and I say your life is valuable, your life is meaningful, you are a father, you are a mother, you are a brother, you are a sister, and now there's poison that will kill you in seconds. And that's the reality that we're in right now is if you don't treat your addiction as if you're treating cancer, you are going to face death.
Very much so.
And so it's like, okay, now we have to have like a different approach to how we're treating addiction, because now it's on the streets. You know, fentanyl is just like it's just what I mean. It's like it's in candy. It's terrifying, right? And so it's no longer like, oh, okay, I'm going to go to treatment. Then when I get out, like I'm gonna smoke crack like a normal person, right? I'm gonna like do some heroin and be okay. No, you're not. You're gonna die, right? So now we have to like go, okay, what is underneath the addiction? Like you weren't born to be addicted to heroin, right? And I think that's what you do so beautifully with your clients, right? It's like you go for what happened in your relationship to attachment to the human being, right? It has nothing to do with the substance.
Well, what do we say when we have, we have our clients write a letter to your drug of choice and say goodbye and all that, and it always sounds like a lover. It often sounds like a lover or someone someone you're very devout to. The thing is these drugs, it's like in the beginning you learn the mood, so you seek the mood swing. You learn the mood swing, then you seek it, and then you use to feel normal. And so I think that the level of addiction is in lockstep with how deep the pain.
Ugh.
Right? Just so when I see someone has a house on fire, I don't, I can just tell. I've been doing this work for so long, and then you do the biopsychosocial. And you get a real understanding of the trauma history as much as they can tell you.
So what is the solution for pain? Because I agree with you.
For pain, like just psychic soul pain?
Yeah, psychic soul pain. Because a lot of people are like listening, or just our clients, right? They're in treatment maybe 6 months, right? And then they have to leave. Like, what is the solution for this soul pain? What can people start doing to help themselves?
6 months if they're lucky.
I know. It's fucking so stupid.
6 months, what if they're lucky?
If they get 6 months of treatment if they're lucky.
Yeah, exactly. These days, gosh, that's a whole nother show about just our field and how fucked up it is now. Anyway, but I think people think they're doing shadow work when they're not. I just recently figured out what spiritual bypassing meant. I'm so late to every party. I never know what shit means because I don't know why. But spiritual bypassing. So I think people. What am I trying to say? I think people like be in acceptance, be in gratitude, forgive. It's like, high ACE score. It's like, yeah, I went through all that shit, but you know what? They didn't know what they were doing. It's like ancestral, and it's like, I'm going to forgive and be gratitude, and I do the Santo Paulo. It's a problem because these people think that they're living in gratitude and they're forgiving and they're open and all this, and that's not shadow work. Shadow work is really paying. So how do you fucking deal with the pain? You have a very real conversation with yourself, and you have an understanding of what your deficits are. I've used words like I'm disabled sometimes, especially from socially and shit, this kind of shit. It's like, so there's there's disability where this isn't the No Bad Parts book, but there's like you're split off in a very real way. So it's that. I don't think people want to admit how devastated they are, how hollowed out, how to the bone, how ravaged they are. And if you're high functioning like I was, you buy it and you believe that you are, So how do you do it? You become very humble, and you find good people that aren't idiots, and you work with them. But I think it's a journey for self. It's over the pantheon. Know thyself. That's it. Your last breath should be identifying, paying attention, being as connected to this ether as you can be. It must be endless curiosity about self. That's what I say. But the first thing is the humility of how quite devastated and shattered you really are. I don't think people do that enough.
I think it's feeling the powerlessness, and in that it's becoming willing to believe that there is another option.
Yeah, it's definitely a balance, though, because you also don't want to constantly be shouting out the inventory of the things that you're in deficit of, right? Because then you just live in that deficit, right?
Agreed. And and then it goes to that swing too, right, where it's a safe space and I can't get out of my room and I need my meds, and it's not till 3 p.m. or whatever. It's like,
right,
that's not good. It's like I'll tell you something. There, in my generation and my grandpa's generation, they called it metal. You had metal, and that means that you had a backbone. You had a value system. You had grit. You were able to like walk it off. It's a real bootstrap thing, which isn't great either. That's why my parents are so fucked up.
Fake it till you make it.
Yeah.
Well, I think addiction is about disconnection. It's I'm disconnecting from the pain, therefore I'm disconnecting from self. So I like to say that recovery is to restore what once was. To restore what once was is a sense of wholeness within self. And you're talking about facing the shadow. I mean, that's like Carl Jung language, right? When I'm facing my shadow, what I like to tell people that come into groups or one-on-one sessions is your job here is to go dive head into your unconscious. That's what we're doing here. We're exploring the unconscious and how it manifests in these compulsive behaviors, right? And I think what happens is if we do face our shadow, I'm not running from it anymore. So I'm not like wasting energy towards avoiding self. Now I'm in creative energy. Now I'm in creative flow where the presence exists, right? So, we need humility in like admitting our deficits. I don't like the 12-step language of like our character defects because I don't
Deficits isn't great either, probably. But, where there's maybe some eclipses, opacity, not fully rendered.
That's why I like the word defenses, right? It's like, what was your defense defending against? It was defending against your pain. Okay.
My therapist would call it unskilled behavior.
Ooh, I like that. That's sexy.
I think it's just be fucking honest with where you're at in the moment.
Dude.
If you're feeling like shit one day, just be okay with saying I feel like
when
shit.
I came into sobriety,
you feel great. I feel fucking awesome.
Great.
That's it.
And I am awesome.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's what a lot of the journey of substance addiction is. It's like, as Marianne Williamson says, she says, we're more afraid of our light than we are of our dark. I think the journey of the addict is, I am so deeply worthy and I'm terrified of that. I am abundant and I'm so terrified of that. Like, I am incredible and amazing and outstanding and I'm terrified of that. So now how do I live in joy? It's like a lot of these people say, well, I can live in the addict, right? Like I can hustle on the streets. They like it. They really get addicted to that hustle, right? Now it's how do I live a really good life? How do I not sabotage the joy?
Yeah, but how do you even know what that is? Like what your value system, because again, it's like if you were in survival mode since you're just little, and now all of a sudden you're, it's like, oh, it's like, what do you want out of life? What do all this stuff. It's like, people don't know. They're just like, oh, I'm working, I'm earning. My nephew right now has more money than I've ever had, I think, in my adult life. It's like because of just how he's earning now at 22, 21, or something, and putting his money in what's important to him. I had a different set of priorities at 21. I don't know, man. I don't even know where I just lost the thread completely.
No, it's beautiful because I think like the addict gets so much negative stigma, but they're beautiful. They're the most sensitive human beings on the planet. And we're all addicts to some degree in some way. Like I said, we just are. Our brain's literally wired for that. So it's just, okay, where is your, like I said, your shadow parts manifesting in your present day life? And I think that if we face our pain, if we face our grief, if we are actually honest with ourselves, we give ourselves permission to have the most incredible lives. If we're not running from our pain, if I'm not running, I'm here. Creating.
Yeah.
And like to go back to what you said about, the attachment stuff, we're healing our relationship to attachment. It's safe to attach. Okay, it's safe again to connect. How do I create safety and connection again? I have to face the parts that didn't feel safe. Okay, so once I face that, now I can connect again.
That's insane. Like look at the like a fundamental, like again, a birthright. It's like what's taken from us, from some of us, just so early on. Like a fundamental thing that the world is full of human beings.
How important is it, and at what stage in, let's say, one's self-reflection and growth, is it to incorporate the family system that you grew up in and the family work for you, like with your clients?
What? Say that again.
So you have clients that have these attachment issues, right? They have trauma that's all over the place, right? They have the way that they react to that trauma, whatever they use, whether you don't have to be an addict. You can have struggles in life with other things, right? But it all stems back to the family, right? The family system. At what point is it important to integrate that family system in the healing process for an individual?
I think speaking to what the question you asked at the top is like, what do we need to do? It's this. So at the end of the day, everyone needs to just, the families should be involved probably right away. But I want to say in the room with the individual, often they don't recognize it as being a part of the problem. They don't want to go near it. Or they know that it was a house on fire, and they think because they're 43 that they're good.
But it's something that Rachel said earlier that's really poignant, and it's so true that the client, the victim, the person in question that's seeking the help, right? They have control of how little or how much the family would be involved in that process, and I think that's very true, because I mean, speaking in my own personal terms, like my family wouldn't have an understanding of who I am, where I was, and my thoughts and feelings to the way that I was raised unless I brought that to their attention, right? They don't fucking know. Like for them, it's the blinders on. You got to take care of families. Dad has to survive. Mom has to provide in her way. And that's it, right? But they don't know the feelings that I'm having unless I'm able to express that, right? And so until I started the conversation, nothing would have changed. But now that I did, awareness, recognition, willingness to express. So I think that the individual in the center has full control of whether or not a family can or cannot participate. It's just the way that it's presented to them, right? Because there are a lot of families that are complete denial. They don't want to go there. They don't want to touch that. All that means to me is that it's just going to take some more time, and it's just the way that you present it to them to be able to have the conversation. But I think it's super important I didn't feel personally, I don't want to use the word healed, but in the process of healing until that I heard from my parents the things that I needed to hear, that I couldn't have a conversation with a therapist because the therapist didn't know beyond what I was telling them, right? So I think that to truly get that repair and work, you have to start incorporating conversation with the family.
Agreed.
Yeah, I think families, if you're listening to this, it's learn how to communicate. Learn how to actively listen to someone. Learn how to reflectively listen. Learn how to not make someone wrong for their experience rather understand them. Don't judge them. Don't make them wrong for their experience. It's like that story. It's like kids grow up in the same household and they have completely two different experiences of their family. None are wrong, but become curious, right? There's so much damage being done in arguments that families have with one another where they're trying to make the other person wrong. It's like it is so hard to be a parent. I mean, as conscious as I am, as much therapy as I've done, it is still the hardest job I've ever done on the planet. And it's okay. And it's okay that it's hard. And also, I have to, no matter what, become curious of my kid's experience, even though it's completely separate than mine. And I think that's how we really learn to reconnect, is by understanding one another and providing people with an emotional language. You're learning when you step into treatment, right? At interactions, right? Or at Ohana, right? You're going in and you're like, you have one language that you've been taught about feelings, and usually there's none. And now you're coming into groups and people are talking about vulnerability, right? It's like, how do you be vulnerable? First, you have to learn the language. I feel this. You have emotions. You have thoughts. They're important. Let's hear them. Let's talk about it. So, sorry, I went on a tangent there.
No, it's fantastic.
I'm clearly passionate.
No, of course. You? No. Yeah. No, I think we're all walking around in pain.
Talk about the pain of getting licensed.
Ooh.
Oh my God, that was awful.
How was that feeling? I know this is off topic, but I'm just curious.
To get it finally?
Yeah.
So I cried every time. I cried every time I lost. I cried every time I won. And but it was a great feeling. They actually, just as an aside, they lowered the final score, so I passed all 3 tests.
Nice.
And that's fun for me. But But it was and it really like because because I practice what I preach and I'm trying to know myself, and so when I draw my last breath, I'm as integrated as I can be. I used the 10 months it took me to get this thing, or more, in therapy, in EMDR therapy, because a lot came up behind the failing.
Mm. Do you feel like your corner of resiliency just got bolstered up and rock solid metalized?
That's a great question.
It makes me feel good because it is I'll tell you something, the EMDR, I'm in there for complex PTSD, and it is about closing a circuit. It's about completing. The reason a lot of us are so fucked up, because like the gazelle in the wild, we couldn't buck and spit and all that, and it's just trapped in us, and it really is that. And I feel like I did, because I start, well, this is my story anyway, but so it's a completion, and that is integrating these parts that were split off because of the fractured attachment. So it was the best thing I could have done for myself, and it was like I was very wholly and completely immature in parts of it, underdeveloped, I would say.
But you pushed through.
I did.
You pushed through, and that's that's beautiful. I mean, it's very difficult, but it's very beautiful too.
I think so.
Yeah.
I can certainly speak to it.
How many times did you take it? 3?
3.
3.
Yeah.
Yeah, my wife took the bar, I think, 3 times.
Bless her heart.
3rd time.
Oof.
Yeah, it's tough. And I think from a resiliency standpoint, I mean, and also just like the relief. How did relief feel for you in that moment?
It's so interesting that, because it's like, coming on to it for all these months, it's like, oh my God, like I have to go to the dentist. It's like, you just, there's something you have to do that's going to be really unpleasant.
Yeah.
And I said, oh my God, I have to do it. There's no choice. It's going to be so unpleasant. Now that it's passed, it's like this expanse. I just have this space in me. It's like the misters at a it feels like that. It's just, I just have this expanse in me. It's all like, it's fantastic. Like I don't have to study. It's over. I've done it.
Yeah. Good for you. Congratulations.
Thanks.
I really was in tears when I found out. I was so excited. I was so happy.
I was proud of myself.
I'm so proud of you, because it's such an accomplishment. And it's so inspiring.
I think so.
Yeah. And I love that you do your own work, man. Like as a therapist. That
you have
do,
to.
But you have to.
Let me tell you something.
And a lot don't.
But dude.
I know.
So in school though, so I went to school after being a drug counselor for 47 years, and then I got into school, and I was often older than my professors. And so one of the girls, probably your age, and she says, so Shelly, how many people do you think, and she's talking about our cohort of however many people there were, like dozens. She goes, how many people here do you think are fit to be therapists? And I said, 70 something. And she says, are fit. I said, no, are not fit. I think 30% probably are skilled or should be.
That
it's bedside manner. You have it. Huh?
That's a very generous number.
I think, well, good. Is it 10? Because come on, people get into this work to work on themselves because they don't know how to do the shadow work. It's disgusting. So many people in my cohort balked at getting their own therapy. 24 units of therapy. I was like, what the fuck? Where are you? What do you think this is?
It should 100% be a requirement.
Unbelievable. Of course it was. Anyway, so that makes me crazy, and doing my own work indeed. And one of a gal I went through school with, she's an amazing person. Came from a fucking unbelievable. Anyway, but she said we did this whole thing at DHS with women coming out of prison. These women were in shelters, just unbelievable. CPS, the whole thing. And we would meet with these women, and DeJoy would say, I'm not only a therapist, I'm a client, she would say. And I've taken that since, because I love that. I think part of a superpower I have is just the authenticity. It's like I will never gaslight you.
I love that.
We will always share a fucking consensual reality. And if my consensual reality right now is that you're getting in your way, I'm going to let you know that.
This is controversial for therapists. How do you feel about self-disclosure as a therapist?
See, so here's this part. So because I cut my teeth on drug counseling, we self-disclose as a drug counselor. It's baked in the cake. Your own story is part of what makes you legit. Even though in drug counseling school they said you don't have to, which is true, have it. But if you need to, at least be adjacent. But if you have a lived experience in addiction, you have more street cred and stuff. So, so I self-disclose. So my thing is, if you're my client, you will know that I walk with complex PTSD, at some point, if it's appropriate. You'll leave there knowing that I have experienced OCD, active OCD as a checker, major depressive disorder, and it's all under the umbrella of complex PTSD with no details. So that's it. So I walk with the heaviness of this. I walk burdened. I have a load. It's like I've been thinking of it lately like there's that thing called chelation where you get metals off your body. It's like I feel like we're burdened like that, like we have a toxic load on us. We're heavy with it.
It was Lori, the clinical director of interactions, that really taught me the benefit of self-disclosure in when you're benefiting the client.
Yeah.
Right? Because there's a difference between I'm going into a group, leading a group, and I'm going to go dump to process my stuff, rather than I'm going to share a personal experience to humanize myself and use that as a way to relate. And it has really improved my dynamics with people.
I don't have a problem with it.
I don't either.
I don't. But again, I think it's funny you say this because in this process, Arthur, of studying up for this test, there were so many times, because I'm not a conventional human being or whatever goes on, that I thought, I self-disclose. It's like, because in school, Freud it's called tabula rasa, the blank slate. You fucking sit there and you say, and someone's just, what? Anyway, so I was thinking, oh no, I'm fake. It's like imposter syndrome. It was a trip.
Yeah,
But I'm not wrong. The way we do it is correct and accurate.
Well, I think as the therapist, as the coach, as the mentor, as the sponsor, you are giving your client a recorrective experience with connection and relationship. So you're modeling for them what relationship can be if it's consciously worked on, right? If you're speaking with conscious language, if you're having recorrective experiences, if you're having reparative experiences, you get to model for them what it can be, right? So I'm all for it as long as it's appropriate. You know what I mean? Like,
no details. There
Yeah.
shouldn't be any details. They should not know your life story, but they should know that you were impacted by some shit.
I mean, sometimes I do details but I'm specific. I'm specific.
But I think there's a lot of, again, it goes back to just being honest, right? Everybody's so focused on just lying and trying to show face that you can actually get 10 times further if you're just being straightforward, right? And I think that from a client therapist perspective, the clients smell it on you. They
Right away.
They're not stupid. They see everything. And so, like you said, street cred, but I think it's, your personal experience without the details of whether or not you want to share it or not. And like you said earlier, it's not to relieve yourself of those issues. The client isn't your therapist or your sounding board, but it's an opportunity for you guys to connect on a deeper level so that you can break certain boundaries for them to cross, right? So,
And you're consistent back to the back to the boundaries thing. Like with clients too, it's like you're always the same. It's like the client's not going to come in and all of a sudden I'm going to be just very different. It's like that's not going to happen. And that's part of, I think, the healing, the therapeutic alliance, is that you're a guarantee. You'll always be the same, and you're a human being.
yeah.
Licensed Shelly Stevens.
Thank you.
I love your voice.
Check me out.
I love you so much. I appreciate you so much. I think you're one of the most gifted therapists.
Yes.
You really are.
It's nice to
100%.
say.
And I feel so happy to know you and that I get to see you in the office often.
Thank you for taking.
I know when Shelly's in the office.
Well,
Oh yeah.
of course.
And I love it. It's always the coolest room to be next to.
I agree.
Aw, that's sweet.
Yeah.
I appreciate
You're
that.
just so
For sure.
unique.
Yeah,
The
very
fact
unique.
that you're not a traditionalist
Yes.
makes you stand out, makes you unique, makes you so relatable.
It is your superpower.
It is. It's your humanity that people are drawn to.
I appreciate that, Rachel. Thank you.
Yeah. Would you like to close us out?
No, I'm good. Thanks.
Yeah.
He's being honest, though, right?
Yeah, we're
So
being honest.
We're
Hey.
practicing. Thank you, everyone, for listening to this episode of Got Mental Health. I appreciate you. And think about what is one way you can be honest today with another individual
And yourself.
and yourself. Thanks, guys.
Thank you, guys.